Okay.
Oh, you're certain it will come down. Okay. No guarantee.
Call this meeting of the Blue Springs Planning Commission to order. Ask that you please stand and join in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome everyone that's here this evening and those that are watching at home. We're going to change the agenda a little bit here this evening. This is Sheila Salone's final meeting as Mayor Pro Tem. Sheila's been a very active member of the Planning Commission before she was a city councilman. So we have a plaque here presented to Sheila Salone in recognition of your leadership, dedication, and commitment. City of Blue Springs Planning Commission, April 1998 to April 2007. So Sheila, we will miss you and we wish you the very best.
Thank you very much. To say I'm very touched and honored. I got some beautiful flowers here, and probably most of you know I'm going to be running for a state representative in the 55th district. So hopefully I'll be able to serve the community in a different capacity. But I'm going to miss serving locally in the local government, and I certainly appreciate all the hard work that you all do on the Planning Commission. So thank you for your service.
I should have had you come up here before, I guess. I don't always agree with all of your conclusions, but I've never known anybody that worked any harder than you do.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you for yours.
Thank you.
Good luck.
I'll go over our agenda for this evening. The consent agenda this evening consists only of the minutes of the last meeting. We have a preliminary plat and a final plat for Adams Dairy Landing. We have a master alternative sign plan for Red Rack's Thrift Store. We have a master alternative sign plan for Sheridan's Frozen Custard. And we have a master alternative sign plan for Blue Springs Marina. So with that, we'll go to the first item on the agenda, the minutes of the last meeting. I'd entertain a motion to approve those.
Moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 2 and 3, which we'll hear together. Mr. Holly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before you tonight is a request for preliminary plat approval and a recommendation for approval of the final plat for lots 4A, 4B, 5A, and 5B, which is a resurvey of lots 4 and 5 of Adams Dairy Landing. It's comprised of about 7.77 acres. This is the area, and perhaps easiest to describe. Is with the concept plan for Adams Dairy Landing, and the area being proposed to be platted and final platted is the area that is comprised of 2 pad lots, both of them outside, and that would be 4A and 5B, and then the lifestyle component of the Adams Dairy Landing, which would then be 4B and 5A. I think that the staff report is fairly complete. Most of, as a matter of fact, all of the requirements for the plat, with the exception of sidewalk, has been taken care of. The sidewalk currently extends to about the main entry, which is about right there. They will be required to extend that sidewalk along the south side of Coronado Drive up through at least the end or the eastern edge of Lot 5B. Staff is recommending approval with 3 conditions. The conditions simply reference the previous conditions that were approved with the preliminary plat and the final plat for Area 1. And with that, I would stand for any questions if anyone has any.
Other questions or comments for Mr. Holly? questions?
guess my question, Mr. Hawley, is the purpose of the replat, are we close to issuing building permits on some of these proposed replatted lots?
In my conversations with Red Development, they are looking at going forward now with the Lifestyle Center. So that is what I am aware of. As far as whether or not they have people lined up for those two pad sites, I'm not sure.
Other questions or comments?
Thank you.
Thank you. The applicant, please come forward.
My name is Jason Raudebush, work for Lucian Inc. We are the engineer and surveyor for Red Development.
Do you have an answer to the question? Are you getting ready to build there now?
I'm unaware of that at this time, but I would probably concur with Mr. Hawley on his comments.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or motions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes. Mr.
I would make a motion that we approve preliminary plat PP 3102535 with the 3 staff recommendations.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the preliminary plat and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay.
And, Mr. Chairman, I would also move that we recommend approval for PF 3102536, the final plat with the 3 staff recommendations.
Okay, we have a motion to recommend approval for the final plat and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Yeah. Let's move on to agenda item 4, the alternative sign plan for Red Rack's Thrift Store.
As stated, this is a request for approval to the amendment, for the amendment of a previously approved Westlake Hardware Center Master Alternative Sign Plan. As most of you are aware, the Ace Hardware on the south side is located at the corner of 40 Highway and Southwest 7 Highway. It is the southeast corner. Red Racks has proposed, and specifically the signs that are located on the west facade of this particular building. The thrift store sign, which has been previously approved, meets the requirements of both I should say, of all 3, the 10% of the facade, 2% of the frontage, and the 200 square feet. However, when they added the Red Racks particular portion of this sign, that put them over the maximum by 60 square feet. So in order to comply with the 10% maximum per building facade, they would have to reduce the sign by 60 square feet. Staff has recommended in this particular case that the Red Rack sign be reduced, or perhaps the thrift store sign be reduced. I don't believe the thrift store sign is up, but the applicant can certainly let us know if in fact that's not the case. And we would recommend then that they meet the sign code for the size of sign. And with that, if there are any questions, if the Planning Commission does choose to approve it, there were 3 conditions provided in the staff report, and we would suggest that you put those 3 conditions in.
Mr. Hawley, on the first, or page 3 of 6, talks about the limitation of 200 square feet. Then it talks about the sign is approximately 201.5 square feet. Yet you say it's over by 60.
Well, let me look at where you are at.
Well, at the end of the first paragraph, it says 200 square feet. Then you jump down to the end of paragraph 3. It says approximately 201.5 square feet.
Oh, there were two different methods of calculating the sign, and it may have to do with that, or it may be that it exceeds the 200 square feet by 1.5 square feet, but the greater of the two would be the 60 square feet for the 10% maximum.
So it's really 260 square feet?
No, I think the total sign area for that particular, for the particular red rack sign is actually 58.5, but when you add the proposed wall sign that is the thrift store, as well as the wall sign that is the red racks, you will come up with 200, looks like 260 square feet.
260? So this is an error? It's 201.5?
No, the thrift store sign is actually approved at 201.5 square feet. And I think that may have been an error on staff's part when it was originally approved. We didn't recognize that it would have the additional 1.5 square feet, and when we received this application and checked into it with closer calculations, we came up with the extra 1.5 square feet.
Okay. Are there other questions? Mr. Billups?
Okay. I understood everything until you guys started talking, and now I'm more confused. But that doesn't change that doesn't change my question. According to your own notes here, it says that the sign area of the wall sign shall be computed by the smallest square, circle, triangle, rectangle, triangle, or combination thereof that will encompass the extreme limits of the writing. So I'm not sure why the way that the applicant has calculated the square footage, which would then meet the standards, is wrong. I know it's not the way we've usually done it, but I'm not sure why it's wrong.
Right, exactly. And when we looked at the way the applicant did their calculations, it comes out meeting the code requirements, but we have a policy that is within our department of how we will measure it based on the code, and our definition of the smallest triangle is a triangle that extends to the top of the largest or the bottom of the largest, and that we draw a rectangle directly around the entire sign. So we don't do individual letters, which is what they did when they calculated.
Okay, but your own notes here say a combination of shapes. So why couldn't?
But our interpretation of a combination of shapes is if, for instance, they have a round logo and you know, a sign that goes with it, you would end up with different shapes.
So if they had a round logo and a word, you would calculate the two separately.
Yes.
But because they have two words, you're going to calculate it all as one big box rather than two boxes.
That's correct.
That seems very arbitrary.
At least inconsistent.
Yeah. Especially since we're not talking about a whole lot of space. And again, you know, I go back to this, and I think we'll go back to this. The sign committee that hasn't met for a while, that I'm still hoping we'll get those changes through. This 200 square feet is one of the things we want to remove, because it just makes things, it creates this kind of a situation.
Well, this said that forthcoming amendments to the sign code, didn't it indicate in here that you would stay with the maximum of 200 square feet?
No, we would remove the 200 square feet, and we would base it strictly on the 10% of facade, in which case it would qualify, it would be fine.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Hawley.
Thank you.
Would the applicant please come forward? Evening.
Hello,
Would you introduce yourself, please?
Dave Shreddy with Springfield Sign and Neon.
All right. Do you have any comments?
No, customers just after the thrift store is really no larger than Goodwill or Deals. It's just that when you add the red racks to it, it makes it over the square footage, and they've got a different kind of font size, which is, as you can see, the F goes up above and then goes below all the signage, and when you take the top of it and the top of it, you've got all that wasted square footage that's just taking away their size. If they were to follow, exactly the big box area, then they'll end up being like the size of red racks, and you won't hardly be able to read it from the road. And right now, as it sits, even though it's lowercase and all, the F is the same height as Goodwill, which are all capital letters because that's their font. Deals is all capitals. They're just a little bit smaller, but they have a lot smaller front over there. But initially, that's the situation of it. And gridding it, we do a lot of gridding if they're individual letters, because that way you can take the top of the T, the bottom of the T, and go up for the H and go down for the R. If it was all capital letters, it would be filling that whole rectangle space.
Do you have a copy of what's out there right now? You were looking at something. I thought maybe you had.
What's out there right now, because we've already got approved for Red Racks.
We just wanted to look at something.
So Red Racks is identical to that out there right now, but there's nothing where Thrift Store is. And this is what I was talking about.
Actually, you can put it right up on the screen. Jim will.
On the overhead.
Yeah.
And that's what the proportion will look like to Goodwill. So it's nothing really tacky or nothing over large, it's just that they have a different lowercase kind of font, and it's kind of a fun font, and makes you taller and longer than all the other letters. So when you calculate that huge box area, you've got all that wasted area that counts for square footage, and this takes away.
What would be the impact to comply with the requirements here?
Thrift store would be about the same size as Red Racks, maybe a little bit smaller than Red Racks now, and you just wouldn't read it from the road.
Go ahead.
Are you aware that there's a Commerce Bank that's going in there in front of you that will probably hinder some visual sight from 701?
Was not, already knew it was kind of tough to see that far down there, but I drove by, obviously coming in, and I seen that in between, because there's business over here and business over here, and there's a good spot that you can read it. So obviously there's a Commerce Bank going right in the middle there.
Well, it's been
Out toward
approved,
the
now
highway.
whether, it was approved a year and a half ago, so.
But it's out toward
There's a
the
reason.
road, the highway.
Not that it matters to what you're trying to do, but there's a recent sign up that's saying they're going to start.
That would just
Oh, there's a new
make it
sign?
that much harder for them to read that size of letters.
So you have as much frontage as the Goodwill store or more frontage?
I think it's, I'm not real sure if where Goodwill actually goes over. I mean, like right there is where Goodwill starts. I'm not sure if it stops here or if they've got this whole facade here.
What is that to the left of?
Deals.
What does that say?
Where
To the left? The signage to the left?
Left of Thrift Store?
that's the red back.
Red
Red
Racks.
In here, it shows the red
Right.
on top of the rack.
Oh, well.
Shows red at it's
yeah,
on an angle.
That's an old art. This is an old art. I never time to get to
But you have that portion too, correct?
Yes.
And another thing is that, they've got Red Racks Thrift Store as their name, and it's so much that trying to. It's almost small.
What you're proposing is red at an angle as it is in our handout, not what you have on your slide.
Right. I just brought this one because this is what I had, just to show you what Thrift Store looks like compared to Goodwill from this distance away. So it doesn't appear like, because this one, it kind of appears huge, but it's really not, comparatively speaking to the Goodwill.
Is the color blue going to be correct, or is it going to be red?
No, it's red. It'll be, yeah, both of them will be red. Sorry, I haven't.
Well, it seemed to me that would be the color you would use.
Is thrift store is red now?
I believe so.
Okay. Are there other questions or comments?
I guess I'm trying to understand then the angle for the red when most of the signs consistently run, straight across. And if there is a connection between the red racks, then why is it in a similar size as the thrift store?
I'm not understanding.
Well, right here it says red rack, this artwork.
Right.
Why all of a sudden the change in the angle on the wording when that would be totally inconsistent with any of the other signage out in that area?
Well, they did it to break up the red rack so you could read it, because if you're looking at it from right here, and since you'd be from the highway here, and I can't even hardly read red rack. It's up on the wall now as red rack, and then he went through the landlord approval and all that, and landlord was okay with that. So it was just a last minute thing that they decided to do, and this will be permanent. But thrift store will be just like it says. Like I said, this is an old piece of art, just so I can show you all what thrift store looks like compared to all the other sizes of the signage out there.
So do you have a piece of art that would show if you were to comply with the requirement of what thrift store would look like?
You mean, do I have one like this with red rectangle? I don't.
Yeah.
I can get one. I mean, it was a last minute thing, and I just thought I'd bring that.
No, I don't think that's what you're asking.
Well,
You're
I
saying one.
mean, yeah, if it was consistent, if to comply with the ordinance as it states right now, do you have any art that would show what that would look like?
How much smaller thrift rack would have to be?
Yeah.
How much smaller?
Thank you.
I don't. It was, like I said, it was a last minute deal, and I looked for a piece, and our artist was out today, so, but it'll be roughly the size of red racks, which are, I think, 36 inches tall.
But you know, the way the facades are at a different here, and you have different signs, the person looking at that can almost think it's two different stores.
Mm-hmm.
Because your signs are different, fronts are different.
That's why I think they're going to stick with just red, red racks and thrift store. I mean, I kind of thought that too. And red racks is their name, and thrift store is part of it. But they're really wanting to emphasize the thrift store, but they can't take away from the red racks.
Are there other questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, do you have to have red racks? Because if they know
now.
who, well, I mean, if they know that it's a thrift store, they know it's a thrift store.
Yeah, it's a new branding that they've done. They're starting to do it all over the U.S. They've done one in Springfield. This one's the second one, and they've got 3 or 4 more across that they're going to do.
What are the signs like at the other locations?
Similar. I mean, they've got the same font. They've got the same red racks at an angle. I mean, they're trying to stay consistent is what they're trying to do.
Well, and the red rack is already installed. So,
Yeah.
Well,
So you'd be talking about taking down an existing sign.
Red racks looks exactly like that on the wall right now.
But it's all one story, right?
It's all one store.
It is
Yeah.
So I guess I don't understand how one got installed without the other component. I mean, if we're looking at
Because they got an approval for a partial sign.
That, and they needed something up because they had a deadline grand opening, and they had, I guess, a certain
That
March.
fit within-
March is a big time for community donations, and so they run off community donations, and they had to get some things going. And I guess unfortunately, if they don't get approved to do this, then we either do something small or something. It's not what Rockies like to go.
Was the red racks brought through here, or was that approved
No,
internally?
it was already approved because
It was?
because it easily met.
No, that was approved through the standard sign permit, the red racks, as well as the sign on the north facade.
And basically with the font and everything, if it doesn't grid, if we grid it, it meets the 200 square foot, but they're not allowing the gridding, which is the, boxes around each letter, individual letter. And initially, if the 200 square foot goes out and changes to just a 10%, it all easily fits even without it gridded. So I mean,
so from what I understand, the red and the racks as individual words, along with thrift store, would meet the requirement. But because of the angle of red,
No.
No. We were able, they were able to let us do one word and two words.
Okay.
And even if we did thrift and store, it's still one big, and you can see how tall the S is and all the wasted square footage above the O, R, and E. Same way with the R and part of the H and the I and the T compared to the F and the H in the thrift. It just, if you don't grid them, you just got that one big area, and it consumes so much of the square footage.
Mr. Billups, do you think the forthcoming sign amendment would allow this to sail through?
Yes, it would.
Other questions, comments? Thank you. Okay, any other comments or motions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I move that we approve ASP 3-10-2524 with the 3 staff recommendations.
second.
We have a motion to approve and a second with the 3 staff recommendations. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
No.
Okay. Let's re-vote. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Billups,
Aye.
Franklin,
Aye.
Haney,
Aye.
Parker,
Aye.
Henning, Banks,
Aye.
Trozen,
No.
Sullivan.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. We'll move on to agenda item 5, alternative sign plan for Sheridan's Frozen Custard. Mr. Holly.
Again, this is a request for a alternative sign plan to allow a monument sign to encroach into the required setback from the property line. Sheridan's is located at the eastern terminus of Northwest Summit Street on Northwest Highway 7. That would be the east side. The applicant in this particular case is requesting that rather than set the monument sign back 10 feet as required by the code, that they be allowed to push that forward to 5 feet. In your packet, you have 2 photos, I think. One of them looks like this. And it shows roughly what that sign, a simulation of what that sign would look like if it were set back at the 5-foot mark. And then you have another that looks like this, and it shows roughly what that sign would look like or where it would sit if it were set back to the 10-foot mark. Should be noted that the existing directional sign is proposed to be removed with this application, and staff is recommending that the alternative portion of this sign plan be denied and that the sign be set back 10 foot as is required by the code. If the Planning Commission chooses to do something different, there are 4 conditions that we recommend that be, there are 3 conditions that we recommend be attached to any approval that was given. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Mr. Holly, in the one where it's at 5 feet, there's a 1 foot 6 inch and there's a 4 foot 6 inch. What is the distance from the right side of that sign to the front of the building? Or maybe the sidewalk in front of the building?
I'm not sure of the exact dimension. What I do know is that if the sign were set back 10 feet, it does not encroach onto the sidewalk. That's how that was explained to me. I did not get the exact dimension of what that would be from the building.
Sure looks here like it would, doesn't it? I'll ask the applicant.
You can ask the applicant, but that's my understanding from
All right.
Lauren.
Other questions for Mr. Holly? Thank you.
Thank you.
Would the applicant please come forward?
Good evening. My name is Larry Hammond. I'm the owner of the Sheridan's Frozen Custard store here in Blue Springs. The store was originally opened, just to give you a little background, in 2001. Lasted for 4 years, closed down. Some of you may remember. Hopefully, some of you may remember. I was asked by Sheridan's to take over that store in 2007, reopen it, which we were able to do with the mission of gaining additional signage. And last couple of years have kept us from doing that until now, but after studying the requirements and talking to Mr. Long at Signway, we came up with this sign. The dimensions are fairly well represented in the picture, but in answer to your question, Mr. Sullivan, I think you asked, the sign would actually, if it were set back 10 feet, would encroach on the existing patio, is what you're seeing, and adjoining sidewalk by about a foot, foot and a half, according to our measurements, mine and Mr. Long's. But the rest of the dimensions of the sign do correspond with the code as was presented. And I'm sorry, I didn't know that it was supposed to have landscaping. Obviously, we would incorporate the landscaping that is existing around it to meet the code as well.
What is your reason for wanting to move the sign forward? Just for more visibility?
Yes, sir, a little more visibility, but also to keep from disrupting our existing plants. And like I said, it would actually encroach on the sidewalk. It would cause me to have to tear out part of my sidewalk and patio in order for the sign to set back in there. The other alternative would be to make the sign a little smaller, which I would hate to do as well. I would not ask for this variance if there were a problem with visibility. Obviously, we do not want our customers or customers of the existing buildings around us, businesses around us, to be endangered by not having a proper line of sight. But even with the 5-foot setback, there's clear visibility from both directions in both exits.
Other questions, comments?
I'm the confused one this time.
Okay.
You say you're within the 10 feet, and staff says that you're not within the 10 feet, so.
Oh, no, sir. I'm sorry if I misstated that. The sign as it's proposed would actually, the leading edge of the sign would actually be where the existing drive-through directional sign is right now. So, but what we are requesting is a 5-foot variance. Instead of being 10 foot back from the property line, we would only be 5 feet back from the property line, which is what this picture shows. Was that? It's actually, our property line is 10 foot from the curb.
Right.
So we would still be 15 feet back from the curb, which is why there's no reduction in visibility. That's, this store actually has a unique feature along Highway 7, that it is the closest building to the curb of any building on 7 Highway. Some of you may remember, if you're longtime residents, that was the old Taco Bell. Mm-hmm. And that was the original footprint of the Taco Bell, just that the front 12 feet was demolished and turned into a patio, a covered patio area. The rest of the building basically rebuilt.
Okay, other questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm glad you used the word variance, because that kind of opens up the question that if you consider this a variance, then there needs to be some kind of a practical difficulty as far as us deciding, that being what is unique to this property that requires that sign to be set closer than what it needs to be. And I know that you had mentioned the existing patio and building, but that was something that was created by the previous owner building the building there. I mean, it's nothing that's unique to the particular piece of property that requires any kind of a variance. When I mean that, meaning the size or shape of it, the topography of it, other than this is a little bit more of a convenience location than what the requirement of the ordinance is. So I guess I'm looking at, in your thoughts, why is this needed? Just simply because of the visibility?
Well, it's because we constructed the size of the sign to meet the sign code. But as I said, you're right, it would create a lot more in cost and construction and a reduced visibility for my new sign if it were moved back that much further. If it's less than 5 feet, it's still not going to go into my patio, and I'm still not going to have the additional cost. So I would be fine with less than the 5 feet. We were really looking at what was still reasonable and practical for that area. So if your question is, since 10-foot would cause us additional cost and constraint, and 5-foot is, maybe by your considerations, more of a variance than you would like to provide, like I said, anything less than the 1.5 feet to cause me to have to tear out some of my existing patio would really work for me.
Well, I guess I don't see why the sign couldn't be reduced to comply with the 10-foot setback requirement, other than you just want this size of sign.
We were sizing the sign according to what the code allowed us, yes, sir.
Was there room for compromise, somewhere between 5 and 10, something in between that?
Yes, sir. Like I said, anything, the sign's dimensions now would encroach about 1.5 feet onto the patio. A variance of even 2 feet would relieve us of that burden.
Is the sign already constructed?
Oh, no, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I look at it to where if they reduce the sign to where we didn't encroach into their 1.5 feet, and they reduce the sign so you don't encroach on the visibility of your neighbors down that's past you, that we probably could, I'd like to have a compromise for them, because I know that visibility is important for businesses, but yet maybe if you could reduce your sign, shorten it.
I think that if we shortened it, we're going to lose readability.
Well, it wouldn't be that
I
much.
thought about that too. They're so close to 7 Highway to begin with. And if you look at the lettering that they have on the front of the building, quite frankly, I think that sign, it looks obnoxious. It's so large.
Well, Mr. Henning, I can appreciate from the angle that you see stopped that the Sheridan's Frozen Custard neon on the front is obvious. I can tell you that when I was asked to go look at the store and consider taking it over, I drove past this building 3 times before I realized that that was indeed where Sheridan's Frozen Custard was. That's because during the daytime and even at night, the sign just on the front of the building is not obvious until you're right in front of the building. So obviously to the traffic on 7 Highway, it's not very obvious as they're
I
coming.
don't think anyone's disagreeing with the need for a monument sign such as this. It's just, does it need to be that large?
I was just looking at going down right between the S and the H, and then going to the top of the H. So it's not, I don't know what the measurements would be, but it wouldn't take that much to make it a little bit smaller and be able to just set it back farther than the 5 feet, but maybe not encroach on your patio.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I think what I heard the applicant say was that even if we had the sign set back 8 foot instead of 10 foot, it could be the size it is, and it would not encroach on his patio.
Yes, sir.
So if we allowed an 8-foot set back instead of a 10-foot setback, which is the code requirement.
2 foot is pretty minimal.
Briefly, estimated, what's the setback for Einstein Brothers and Zardes? Jim?
Well, they're both on pole signs,
Right.
so it's.
I mean, you can go Quick Trip across the street that's on a monument sign. I mean, I think they're all within that same parallel. I mean, whether it's a pole sign or a monument sign, to me, it's the same thing. It's a sign.
Actually, originally, when this was a Taco Bell, there was a pole sign, and the pole sign was located exactly where the directional sign is. but that was a part of the agreement with the signage ordinance
Well, yeah,
in effect at that time to.
Understand that. I'm just
And
trying.
I think that goes back to being grandfathered in before the widening and
Right.
everything that was done on 7 Highway, so. Now, Quick Trip wouldn't be that way, but Einstein.
I'd say Quick Trip probably is pretty
Zardes
close.
would have been, those signs have been there for a long time.
I think maybe another option, if I'm not mistaken, is I think Highway 7 comes along here, and I think they're proposing their sign up here. Maybe the applicant would like to address what would happen if they moved their sign slightly to the south and got it out of the way of that walkway, in which case they could keep the sign and be set back 10 feet. But again, I'll let you address that. I thought that was one issue you and Lauren had discussed, but I'm not sure.
That was going to be my.
Thank you, Mr. Holly. That would actually probably work.
Because I was struggling with why you had it right there, because obviously if you move it back, you're going to the sidewalk. If you move it south 2 or 3 feet, it seems to me you could.
Still comply with the 10-foot setback.
Actually, that would probably work for us as well. The difficulty, just which you don't see the topography on this sign, is that it does slope there. So I'm not sure. I'd have to ask Signway, but I'm not sure if that might then cause us to have the base elevated on one side and lower on the other in order to be within the code. But I'm sure that it's not something that we couldn't work around either.
Seems to me a better alternative. With the rest of
I
it.
would certainly support that. But, I mean, it is awful big, and I understand what you're trying to do, but awful close to the road, it really, I think it would just look better aesthetically for your store to have it further south and back to the east a little bit. So, and that way, you know, I would be okay with you keeping the sizes.
How far south would that need to be moved? Do you know, Mr. Holly?
No, I do not have the exact dimension of how far south that would need to be moved, no.
I mean, if you're willing to move it south, it's almost a moot point.
I'm just trying to remember there is a light pole there, a telephone pole, but I don't believe that it would cause any encumbrance there. Like I said, it's just the topography that caused, and the existing sign that we were planning
Yeah, I
on
actually think
replacing.
the light pole's almost more in the way now, the way you got it.
Yeah, I think if you look at the plan that's out there, it would just about line up with your existing directional sign. As I understood, you were removing the directional sign, so you would just pull that sign over.
Yeah, the directional sign is actually, it's not in the position that you see on there. It is a little bit further north than that. But to Mr. Franklin's point, we could pull it to the south and avoid the sidewalk, so.
And I'll just tell you that I think where your drive-through sign is now, it's like in the middle of your property, so it's kind of confusing. I think if you move it further south where the actual drive-through is going to be, that's actually a plus too.
That's a very good point. Like I said, that's my understanding, that's where the pole sign was previously, so that's where the electricity is. But if we're going to be digging a new foundation, then we'd have the opportunity to move that electric anyway, so it wouldn't be a big problem.
Okay.
By doing that, are you still taking away your directional sign?
I'm sorry?
I said you will still be taking away your directional
Oh,
sign?
absolutely, that was a part of our proposal, was to replace the directional
That's
sign.
basically what the monument sign says.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, drive-through.
Just double checking.
Okay, any other comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, entertain a motion on this.
I move to approve ASB 3-10-2540, which is actually approving the denial. of it, being that it seems like we need to a resolution.
No, wait a minute, what are your?
Just to kind of clarify, they, because of the number of signs that they have right now, adding the monument sign requires them to amend a master sign plan that's already on file. If the difference would be if the sign were to be set up 5 feet, they would need the alternative master sign plan, that alternative being moving that sign forward to the 10-foot mark. If you choose to have them move it south but maintain that 10-foot mark, what you're approving is just a amendment to the master sign plan to allow for the monument sign as well as their other signs that are already approved. That make sense?
What you need to do is move for approval with the fourth condition.
Yes, I would recommend that we approve this request for signage with the additional request that the monument sign be moved south to the extent that it meets the 10-foot setback requirement.
Second.
So that's.
It seems a little vague on moving it south. I mean, they can move it an inch and comply
Well,
with this.
but to get to the 10 feet.
I understand.
Basically,
Right.
I hate to say 3 feet and then they only get
Yeah.
9 feet
Yeah.
setback, so.
Yeah, I think it's up to the applicant as to how far south he wants to go,
As long as he can meet that.
as long as he can meet the
10 feet, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, we have a motion and
Is that
a,
including the other three staff recommendations?
Yes.
Yes, yes. I added those.
Yeah, that was for condition before.
all right. We have a motion and a second to
Second,
approve.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right. Okay, we'll move on to Blue Springs Marina. Ms. Atkinson.
Good evening, Chair and Commission. The Blue Springs Marine has requested approval of their sign program, which is Plan Case ASP 3-10-2530. They submitted an amendment to their previously approved alternate master sign plan, which had the number ASP 10-07-1393 and was approved on November 12th, 2007, when the property transitioned from being a car dealership to a boat dealership. The property is located at 3200 Northwest Jefferson Street, located east of Woods Chapel and on the south side of Jefferson Street, abutting I-70. It's approximately 3 acres in size and zone general business. The previous approval granted permission for 7 signs. The previous approval granted permission for 7 signs, including 6 wall signs and 1 freestanding sign, which is located along Jefferson Street. 2 signs are included in the current request. The first sign that is included in the current request is actually a previous sign that was apparently modified from saying Ford service to just saying service. And it's indicated as sign number 2 in your packet. This was, the city has no record of permits on this sign. It's apparently been in place for quite some time, and it was not included in the 2007 Blue Springs Marine sign plan. It's 36 square feet in area and attached to the north facade. There are no other signs along the north facade of the building. The sign complies with all code requirements except that it's required to be part of a master or alternative sign plan due to the quantity of signs on the site. The second sign that is included in tonight's request is actually a proposed freestanding sign that would abut I-70. It's labeled as sign number 9 on the plans. It's proposed to be 96 square feet in area and to be 12 feet in height. They would like to use an existing sign base from previous freestanding sign. It's proposed that the sign would extend from the sign base towards the interstate, and that would allow increased visibility. The sign does not have to be a monument sign because of it being in close proximity to I-70, as long as it's part of an alternative sign plan. Regarding area, to determine the area, the total signage facing I-70 is required to be less than 2.25 square feet per frontage length. The proposed 355.3 feet of signage facing south is less than that 2.25 square feet of signage. However, please note in your packet on page 5 of 7 in the bold, there was just an incorrect number written. It's listed as 498.3 and it should be 355.3 as far as the total square footage of signage along the south. Regarding setbacks, the sign is required to be set back 10 feet from the property line unless specifically approved to be less as part of an alternate alternate sign plan. The applicants are requesting a 1.5-foot setback. Staff is recommending that the 10-foot setback be followed and that the sign be moved so that the leading edge of the sign is at least 10 feet from the south property line. Staff's recommending approval with 4 conditions, including the recommended 10-foot setback and also issuance of a sign permit for the existing service sign that does not have a permit. Are there any questions?
Any questions from the applicants? Thank you. The applicant, please come forward.
Good evening. I'm Dave Israel. I'm with Signarama here in Blue Springs.
Okay. Do you have any comments that you want to make?
Well, we've been trying to determine exactly where the property line's at on the south side. Lisa and I had a discussion, and Lisa had something that showed it at 15 feet from the edge of the parking lot. If you go online to one of the city's websites and use their measuring tool, we actually show it to be about an additional 10 feet. We're not really sure where that property line sets. So we're asking for this variance at 1.5 feet because we're not right now 100% sure whether that property line is there or whether it's another 5 or 6 feet down. We would still be outside of the 10-foot variance by a couple of feet with this sign. We placed it here for a couple of reasons. One is there's an existing base there where there was the Ford pole sign that had the big sign up in the air. We'd assumed that they had put that in according to code when they did it, and that it was far enough off the property line. Of course, we found out after we started digging and talking to Lisa that it probably was put closer to the freeway than it was originally permitted for. But we have a base there that is, a perfect base for this sign. To move it back so that it meets that 10-foot setback would set the base of the sign back in a cut that is behind it into the parking lot. And the sign at this height anyway would be hidden by shrubbery and by vehicles and boats and things that are parked in that parking lot, which is part of the reason we kind of cantilevered it out towards the freeway a bit. We also looked at going up in the air with it and trying to get it above the vehicles and things in the parking lot. We tried to find a way to fit it within kind of the current parameters for these types of signs. But there are light poles on both sides of where that would be setting, and there'd be lights sitting right in front of the faces on the sign. So now you're talking about moving sign poles, moving and pouring a new base, moving electrical, and it becomes a lot more expensive to try to put the signage up to do that. The sign base itself is actually setting approximately 94 or 5 feet off the edge of the road. It's set a long way off the road, even as it is. There are no neighbors to encroach upon where it would, be a nuisance to them, and so we've tried to design it to fit in there, where we'd have a nice looking sign. We tried to kind of fit the monument idea by putting a base underneath it as well, so it doesn't look like a pole sign. So, and this is what we're after, and this is what we're trying to do. Our biggest thing is trying to get it out away from the elements that would block it and give it visibility to the traffic up and down I-70, without getting big and way up in the air.
I compliment you on a modified monument sign as opposed to a pole sign. I think this would look better than a pole sign.
Thank you. We do our best to try to keep our customers within the current sign code. It just happens that this space, because it's along I-70 to start with, you have to have something way larger than the normal sign code, just for the 70-mile-an-hour traffic to be able to read it. And so, starting with that and trying to use the existing elements that were there is why we've ended up here. It gives us a really nice sign, for a decent price.
Okay, other questions or comments for the applicant? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments and/or motion?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion with a change. I'd like to approve alternative master sign plan for Blue Springs Marine ASP-3-10-2530 and removing condition 4.
I would second that.
Okay, we have a motion to approve without condition 4. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, we have approval. Okay, that brings us to the end of our agenda. Is there anything else anybody needs to bring up this evening?
I would. I don't know how many of you know this, but Commissioner Culpepper and Banks and I are all three going through the Citizens Police Academy. This is the 6th one that they've done. And for those of you that don't know what it is, find out. And for those of you who are thinking about doing it or haven't done it, get on the list. It is cool and it is fun and it is so informative. I'm having the time of my life going to those classes, and it's just a really cool experience.
All right. Anything else? Entertain a motion to...
Workers' birthdays today.
Happy
birthday.
Thank you. Sheila wants to sing happy birthday to you.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Adjourned.